So that would be great, if, even if we don't hear back, just to really
Yeah.
continue that pushing over of information to them so that nobody can ever say we're not sharing,
That's correct.
right? And I would say that as well, kind of move back a little bit with KHRC, you know, and HUD, as they're seeking to develop, and I know we're talking about McGinnis now, but I'm just saying, as they keep talking, let's develop these relationships and these partnerships. And we know that that has not always been true. So it's us going above and beyond to share and push that information so that none of these guys can ever say, I didn't get it or I didn't know.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
And what we knew with the Changing Our Culture initiative was it was interdepartmental in the city, that there were other players we needed to network with. We set there had always been some doubling of fines built into the code that we had, but we, at the beginning of this initiative, added some strength to the doubling of fines for repeat offenders, particularly LLCs who were dodging even getting their reports. And so these are coming for now to test. Did you have a question?
Yeah,
or comment,
comment.
please?
So, and maybe we've done this to some degree, but it would seem to me, partially for legal reasons, but we should have some sort of matrix that we develop for that triggers when a repeat offender gets elevated to that next level. Because it seems to me if we had that, it would, one, help your staff know, great, I can finally move this on because we've hit these levels. Two, it would let those repeat offenders know, this is where you're at on this matrix, and you're about here, and then there's no turning back. And then three, we're not doing selective enforcement, but it really helps us to solidify that concept with anyone who claims that we are, gets upset. No, we have a baseline, and you've hit it, and that's why, you know. So just something to throw out there. I don't know what that would look like. I'm sure maybe some other cities have done something, but it may give us some better direction, and then folks like us some understanding of.
We have it in our software that when we hit a property, when I say hit, when we abate a property more than once per year, the fines are doubled automatically, just for recovery. So I would like to see those cases where we have to complete an abatement twice or more than one violation per year per property get sent right to court. Because we've already been here, we've already discussed this, this is what you've got to do, and if it's the same violation, say at a different apartment, same complex, I would like to see that sent right to court.
Well, and I think that's my point. I think if we can take those and put them literally in that matrix and say, this is it, this is how we're going to operate, right, then we're not having to say, well, why'd you do it here and not here? Well, we're trying to work with them. Nope, too bad. They hit them, they did exactly what you wanted. And again, it lets you point to that chart with you and staff and say, let's go. That's it, you've hit it. And then that way it's a little more formalized for everybody to understand.
And a visible representation
Yeah.
too, of where you are on that matrix would
Right.
be helpful too, rather than saying it's.
And I think it
You
helps the
might,
public, it
Nicole.
helps us show the public, see? It helps us show the public, see, we've got these baselines and we can show you exactly where the person you're concerned about falls. So just an idea to help give everybody some more direction.
We're going to touch on this a little bit later in the meeting, but absolutely. I mean, one of the things we're doing is looking, it's time to update the code itself. But looking back, they're only, John talked about automatically charging double for the abatements, but that's partly because it's been overlooked that in the code before, it was automatic for any violation. Somehow the interpretation since 2015 was that it was only for abatements. And so they've not been charging unless the court has charged some of these fines and fees. And so, you know, I worried about whether, because if they hadn't been charged before, could they be a repeat offender? So we've got work to do as people review the code, you know, double check. Does it say what I thought it said? Is this something we need to put in the code, or should it be in an admin policy, but one that we're aware of, and a standard operating procedure? John has worked on those, but we'll look at them again as we look at the code.
That's why I provided this report. So
Thank you so much.
See the repeated offenses on it.
And we'll get back to that in our next item. Let's have a quick positive story, as I understand it, a report on White Lakes Plaza, which was an offender when we started as well. We still have a case in court on an offense there that had been going on for a couple of years, but apparently there's been some improvement.
So, yeah, we had.
This is Nicole Stovall from staff. pick one, go.
Okay. So I had put together a two-page document that talked about White Lakes from 2023 to 2024. And originally, when I was looking through here, it almost felt like we hadn't completed what we thought we had until I went and compared with fire.
Which
And-
document are we looking at?
It'll have,
Should be table.
This one? Yep, on the
That one?
bottom. Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
yeah.
Fine print. Okay,
So the first page is 2023 from White Lakes, the second page is 2024. We had quite a few more in 24 than we did in 23, but that spoke to what we were doing with our multi-housing inspections with fire, and going and not only just doing the like building complexes, but then also posting notices to all of the interior doors. So February 9th is when and that was the highlighted section on that second page, was when we went with fire to go and do those inspections. And you could almost see immediately afterwards, we got calls for specific actual apartment complexes then for interior and follow-up ones as soon as we went in. So whereas it seems that we have quite a few more cases, that would be because people are actually calling. And what we were doing was successful in going in, doing the building inspections, but then also giving people an opportunity to say, hey, if there's anything else for interior, here's the number to call, posting those on those interior doors. And then I think Alan has also been speaking with the change in ownership, and he had a follow-up with that as well.
Certainly. So from the
this is
fire.
Alan Stahl from the fire department.
Yes, sorry about that. Certainly, from the fire department standpoint, we did that joint inspection on the 9th of February last year. During that, we cited 42 code violations for fire code. During subsequent re-inspections, those were not abated. So in May, we worked with prosecution and had those cases filed. Prosecution received a default judgment on all violations. So the owners were non-communicative with the court. They ended up in a default judgment with a fine estimated to be imposed of $42,000. The day prior to sentencing, the management company worked with our lead prosecutor. Essentially, they took over the apartment complex from the non-communicative owners. They immediately began an abatement process of the fire codes, and they are working building by building, code violation by violation to address all of the issues. And we now have a great working relationship with that management company, and we are seeing forward progress. And in discussions with Kelly Trussell, who was the prosecutor on the case, she said that they are outstanding to work with now and have met all of our requirements as we put them forward.
Please.
Okay, so the non-communicative, this is just base information I'm wanting. Were they located in Topeka or outside of Topeka?
I believe they are outside of Topeka where they are owned.
And so the new ones that are in charge, are they the owners or the property maintenance?
So they are the property management company, and they are now from my understanding, that's in receivership. They are not located in Topeka as well. However, their representatives come over here regularly to meet with our teams. So it's a property maintenance company that's working on that. There's some ownership in flux, but there has been a definite positive change in the quality of the apartment complex.
And was the $42,000 then collected on? I mean, that moved forward?
I believe that is still suspended right now, pending them fixing their violations.
How much time will they get for all of that?
That would be, we'll have to ask prosecution on that. Depends on what it is. So the hard part with the fire code stuff is a lot of it takes building modifications and contractors. So as long as they're showing us legitimate forward progress, bringing in alarm companies, changing out panels, doing some very complex changes, we'll continue to work with them.
Okay, thank you.
Something we may want to think about, because when we got into this whole business, the issue was that nobody was getting charged anything. The things were getting extended 60 days at a time and so on is, and something John and I in particular have talked about, but probably all of us have one way or another, is, it's taking a lot of time when our people, literally just simply when our people have to go back and continue doing re-inspections, have to go meet with prosecutors, and so working on something that may be an administrative sidebar to the policy that allows the fines, similar to what Councilman Duncan said as a matrix for the repeat offenders, is to look at, we do have fines and we have fees. So looking at how those are constructed and making sure that at least if somebody's non-compliant and they, particularly if it's a rental property where they are making money and other people are having to live in that situation. And one of the things that along that line that got dropped over the years was, for a long time, our code compliance department never gave more than 30 days for an interior violation on an occupied rental, because that's a rent period, and for people to know and be able to keep paying their rent, know that they're going to be able to stay, and so on. That was important. So thinking about some of those sidebar guidelines and working on how we can collect. Other questions? Yes.
So Al, as the court levies these fines, and I know we work with them, so they could drag this out for as long as whatever. Even if you have a matrix, they could still drag it out, and the conditions may improve slightly. We don't have a recourse for we've given you the 90 days, you've not gotten it done in 90 days, now what?
Yeah, and I can't.
I think I can
Yeah, I was
probably
gonna
take
say, I was
that. That's a
gonna
legal
punt to
question.
you, Amanda.
So when it goes to court, the prosecutors, petition the court, but ultimately it's the judge deciding, do they get extensions, do they not? If it's somebody that's not making progress, while the prosecutors can ask the court, we're asking you don't give any more extensions, the court can sentence. They don't have to give extensions. Ultimately, that's a judicial decision that the judges decide. It's not decided by staff at this table. Our prosecutors do petition the court when it seems like it's dragging on too long, that someone just needs to be criminally sentenced and move forward rather than continuing to give time.
Thank you for that. Nonetheless, if we do a better, I don't say better job, because the code is really pretty well done, but of defining what are life safety immediate life safety things. We used to have a sidebar with code that said, I don't know exactly what it said, but we made it clear that we could give 24, 48, 72 hours, 5 days, whatever, on certain things. And we had that so that we did do that regularly. So if these sewer problems, for instance, where you really can't
There
live
is lots
there.
of case law on life safety issues. When it's
Yeah.
a true life safety issues, we do immediately petition to the court. We ask them to go. But I do want to level set some expectations too. I mean, when you criminally sentence somebody, that doesn't mean the problem's fixed. It means
Right.
they're criminally sentenced and the fine is sent
Right.
to them and they're sentenced. It does not mean that the
Right.
problem gets fixed.
Right.
And so that's part of the communication back and forth. We can get orders to go in and abate. We do that with some of those life safety issues. We can condemn the property, but then also the tenants are out and then it's working through that. So it's a cycle. It's not an easy fix, and just sending it to municipal court does not mean that the problem suddenly gets fixed.
Right.
But I think, and, all of this gets over my head sometimes, but the bottom line to me seems that we have to become more aggressive through all legal venues that we have to start collecting. Instead of just, well, we're going to give them more time, we're going to give them more time, we're going to give them more time. Because, I asked the city manager last night, I want to know with McGinnis how much has been, collected on. And that would be interesting to know for the top 10 offenders, how much, has been no, we're not going to charge them, we're not going to fine them anything. The city ends up eating that, and then how much has really been fined and collected on. I also still think we need to be looking at the collection place that we work with, because I just don't think we're getting aggressive enough. And I think that that's why these slumlords know that they can get away with so much.
Correct. It is a balancing act. Once they are sentenced, it is out of the legal department's hands. It's a municipal court's hands who does handle their collection agencies. You can't selectively only choose certain people to get aggressive with in collections. It's all or none, which is a balancing act because we have a
Right.
lot of socioeconomics at play in our community. And so it does become a balancing act. I know Judge Thadani has lots of avenues to allow payment plans for people to allow that level set before he sends things to collections, and he applies those across the board. But I am sure that municipal court can pull those records on what has been collected on that.
But is there not something in the law that looks a bit differently at a huge LLCs, multiple LLCs that are causing harm, that are causing public health and safety crises versus, maybe 5 units, that has a couple of issues every now and then, and maybe receiving, receive Section 8 vouchers. I mean, isn't there any way to judge that?
The governing body can pass ordinances as long as there's a rational basis for it, like you just articulated, that, this is different, this is an apartment complex making money off someone versus someone in their house trying to stay in. And we can make you as a governing body can make those rational policy distinctions. I do think the municipal court judges, not to speak on their behalf, would like an ordinance to rely on rather than them using their gut reaction, because to Councilman Duncan's point, that is when you get sued for selective enforcement. But if it is set out in an ordinance and it has been thoroughly documented that this is the rational basis, then when we do get sued, then I can defend it and say, look, I've got all these minutes in the record of my governing body saying that this is why they put this law into place.
Then I think we should consider something.
Spencer?
So I think to that point, I think where sometimes we have a disconnect, and this is us not asking enough, is we're not in the court every day. And we see these reports and we understand who some of those individuals are or what the issues are. But I need the people who are in the court every day to generate what those trends are, and then they can come back to us and say, why don't you have an ordinance that's doing this? Because to that point, I'll keep doing what I can, but it'd be really nice for me to say, no, that's the law and you have to follow it. And so I do think we need some input from our judges and our prosecutors of, this is what we're seeing and this is the laws other cities have done. Please pass this. And if we don't like it, we'll tell you. And if we're good with it, great. I mean, because I think from my perspective, to your point, yes, criminal actions don't mean the problem gets solved. But I do think we've reached a point where with the 10% that are dragging down the 90%, who have gotten somewhat accustomed to the civil action, we've got to start looking at our nuisance laws and our public health laws, and then on top of our code compliance laws, and really pushing those to say, this has now gotten to the point where it's absolutely criminal. We're not just going to come fine you, and it's a criminal act. Because I think some of them will take that a little more seriously than just sending the lawyer out and do it. So I think having some of that feedback from the actual judicial system would help guide that.
I will look at what other states are doing. I've looked in Kansas. We're pretty progressive on the front end of things. We're the only one with an LLC that appears to be successfully prosecuting corporations now through municipal court. But there are other states that have done some intriguing things. So I will work on a memo on that end. But also, I'm sure Judge Thadani would be good to bring in the pay dockets and all of those before collections. The prosecutors, we aren't involved at that stage, so it's truly just the court system at that point. So we can see what Judge Thadani can come in and tell you about those trends and those kind of things and what he sees.
Awesome, thanks.
That would be really great, because one of the very first things we did in this initiative, as you remember, was that we looked at the fact that poor people who lived in their own homes were being treated, everybody was getting the same number of extensions and so on, and we made a commitment that we were going to change that. And so to find out whether that worked or not, and if so, just kind of how it went. And I know Kelly had said she keeps real good records too on the prosecutor's side.
We do. I just want to make sure Judge Thadani's speaking, because I have
Right.
limitations of where our roles end and his start.
Right. Did you have something? Okay, thank you. Well, again, we are at this 3-year point, things that we thought we'd moved in place, still really getting going on interior inspections. And so our last action report was, in the last couple of months, we amended the ordinance to clarify that pest elimination rules to make sure that if more than one unit was infected in an apartment building, that it got taken care of. John, you have the report on, we had a problem property, at least one or two, and then since that's been implemented, how are we doing?
So since the implementation of the new ordinance, we've had 2 cases, one of which was at Atchison. The issue with that Atchison is it's tough because we can only get into one apartment. Nobody else will let us in. So to fill those elements, as you know.
Are you talking about the motive power building?
Yeah.
Okay.
They won't let us into the other apartments, not management, the occupants.
Have you posted on the
Yeah,
doors?
oh yeah, well, we knocked to try to interview, saying, hey, we're having issues with this apartment, can we inspect yours, do you have any problems? So the people say no, and they won't let us in. So they didn't want to have anything to do with us. However, the apartment that we went to at Atchison, the occupant had a disability, and I think he contributed to if that's the same thing that you got from speaking to the family, that's the same thing I got, that's the same thing my inspector got. So the property's still cited. The property owner agreed to clean the property, and the gentleman has vacated the property. He has found some other place to live. He's gotten some more help. I think he needed some more assistance. The other property that we're talking about was indeed a bed bug violation, and for roaches, I'm sorry, it was originally reported as bed bugs, but then it turned out to be roaches.
Oh,
So,
What's the difference?
the landlord was cited for that. This was not a multi-housing, this was a, much smaller. And, and that gentleman, has been cited, and that occupant has moved out. But again, a few years back, we discussed changing our policy, so even if the occupant moves out, we still demand a final inspection. That should happen this week, and he's being held accountable for it. And if he doesn't give us a final inspection, we just take him right to court.
that sounds good. Well, and
Yeah.
it sounds like, I mean, what we did with the policy on multifamily, instead of just saying it was the landlord or the tenant if more than one unit was infected, was to
Right.
say that they both were, to give that latitude. If somebody's causing it, they've got some responsibility too, even though the landlord's got to take care of the rest of the building. Okay. So, maybe that one's gonna move forward. Sounds like a good plan. Any questions or? Okay. We've got some big data reports here. 2 of them. One is, and thank you for that, John. Overall, we had talked about getting our performance measures on whether we were, how many units we were inspecting, whether particularly with some owners that we'd had a lot of problems with, were we able to reduce the number of inspections? We also were interested, as we've talked about already, at seeing that we could reduce the amount of time it took from a first inspection to getting a property fully code compliant, saving re-inspections, saving time people had to live in it, and so on. We realized that during COVID, those years when we started, the first couple of years of this initiative, A, it was COVID, B, John was short on inspectors, and so having a baseline citywide was kind of tough of how many inspections we did and how we did with them. And so the request came through, since there had been so many from Lou McGinnis, starting really at about that time, if we could use that as a case study. And with that, I think we have a report
You do.
on just the McGinnis cases.
So again, the report, it's the one that's got a bunch of highlights on it.
The one we already looked at for sanitation is the same report, right, John?
Correct.
Sanitation was just included with
It's
it.
just
Right,
included.
which is fine.
So for the case study, Lou McGinnis Properties had 133 cases last year. He owns 38 multi-housing. Yeah, the neighborhood of 38 multi-housing complexes. The good news is that there's only 29 cases still open, and 6 of those are sanitation.
How many again?
29 still open,
But we started with how many in 2020?
133.
133. And of the 29, how many are just the, what, 4 or 5 sanitation?
6.
6.
There was a huge escalation toward the end of the year with the cases only because of the old trash debacle. The lack of trash bin is considered a housing violation. So that's why you see so many housing violations highlighted on this. There's a couple that are, there's 6 of them that are still open with no trash bins. I expect those to be filled any day. I heard Mr. Frederick last night. I heard what he said. I agree with some of what he said, but I don't agree with all of what he said. I know that after speaking with Waste Management, they are limited on the amount of dumpsters. So if somebody came in and said, hey, I have 38 complexes, I'm gonna need 150 dumpsters, they might not have 150 dumpsters to give you. Well, that's what Mr. Frederick should have thought of, and not rely on Waste Management. So Waste Management is doing their best, because I got the phone with the management, to fill those 6 as quick as possible. They might not be the regular big dumpsters, but there'll be some dumpsters on the property to get the trash off the ground. So we're working not only with the staff from Lou McGinnis, but we're working with Waste Management. We're trying to make this go away, because like I said, this is exhausting my staff to get out to these properties every day on top of what they normally do. To make sure that they're kept up and kept clean. You see a lot of CBOs on this report that's closed by owner.
Okay.
That is because my staff works extremely hard with their staff to bring this into compliance. Typically, when we cite a property, if we don't have a chance to speak to the property owner, let's just say we speak to the occupant. We always ask the occupant who the landlord is, and yes, we do have to share this information with the landlord. We will need to get in touch with the landlord if you want this fixed. If not, I can send the paperwork through, but it doesn't always work that easy. So my staff is trained to contact who's making the repairs to the property, get them involved in this discussion, find out when it can be done, and yes, you're getting paperwork on it. Nobody's getting any breaks. We're gonna document everything we can, but we're looking forward to you getting this completed before the end of the time frame. And that's how we handle every case. If you can, congratulations, it will stop at that point. If you're a repeat customer, it's not gonna stop. I'm gonna send this right through, because you are a repeat customer. And so I think we're getting much, much better results when the evaluators, my staff, go out and they communicate with the responsible party. We get much quicker turnarounds. It's those that don't respond to us, that don't want to communicate, that give us a hard time, that extend our time frame for some reason. They just don't want to fix it. That last infestation was one of them.
Go ahead.
So to that, I made a comment last night during my comments that, this stuff piled up 3 weeks. What they could have done was gone and rented some dang trucks, taken that stuff down to the dump, and I don't know that that's actually what code says per se. That's clearly what would have been the right thing. But I guess if you could briefly talk about, we'll use this case just because it's in front of us, but conceptually, if they had told us when we went out there, look, this is the issue, these people are not picking up the trash like we thought, I mean, I'm assuming our still direction is, we sympathize with you, we understand, but nonetheless, you got to figure a way to get this trash out of here, right?
That's correct.
And then if you got to go sue whoever you got to go to sue, that's between you and them. Okay.
We've had many discussions with Mr. Frederick, with other staff members of Lou McGinnis. I've heard of probably 5 or 6 different stories. All of them are believable, however, it's still happening. So I sympathize with you. However, this is your problem, and it's affecting all your occupants. And it's all over Facebook, and I'm tired of seeing it. So what are you doing to fix this? So he has hired staff out of Oklahoma City to come up in box trucks. And we have video and pictures of this, of them loading the trash in back of box trucks, driving it all the way up north and dumping it like he should. However, he didn't hire enough. You have 38 properties. You should have an army of staff down here to manage 38 properties. You don't. So if something like this happens, this is what it's going to turn out to look like.
Thank you.
It's tragic, it really is. It was the perfect storm at the perfect time. But we're dealing with it. We're doing everything legally we can, and we're going to see that he's held responsible for it.
One of the things we were looking for in this report, and maybe we're not quite there yet, was, well, for one thing, I think, again, our goal was to reduce the number of problems we had, but be inspecting 100% of what was needed, right? My understanding is this is a substantial number more properties being inspected this year than last year. But also we were wanting to look at how much time it was taking from opening the case to closing the case. And on this report, it looks like all we're seeing is date closed, but not yet the data on how long it's taking from first inspection to CBO or another resolution. Because what we heard early on from these properties, and again, we're trying to get the city going again on interior inspections, and it just so happens that we ended up with a large property owner at the same time. Can you talk a little bit about last year to this year?
I can.
And you're talking about the process, but we're not sure.
I can't give you a number right now, only because,
That was Lou from last year.
67 cases from last year?
And it might be conservative because this was a report that was made based on all of the addresses that go specifically back
Yeah, I
to
guarantee you we
the
got.
Oklahoma address. And so if there's any that in our system we haven't had,
She ran a report one way, I ran it a different way. I opened up every case and touched it. And
Okay.
that's the document there, so it just reflects differently. I can tell you right now that this year would be a good base year because I have taught my inspectors how to manage each case individually. You have to reach out to who's responsible, get in their ear and convince them that there's a way to fix this to keep you out of court and to protect your occupants. If not, we don't forget. And no matter what you purchase and no matter where your people go, if they report it, we know what type of action you take, if it's positive or negative. So there is a learning process, and they learned this year on how to manage the people they deal with. And so in the past, you've had us go to a complex, a house, whatever the case may be, cite it, and send it through the process with no speaking of who's responsible, no management, no nothing. This year, probably half of last year, I have changed that. So my people will go out, figure out what the violation is, how it happened, who's responsible for it, speak to them, get them on course to making the repairs, give them any type of resources they need. If this is a rental property, you don't need a resource. This is your money. This is how you're making it. So don't tell me that you're having issues. If you can't manage your own rental property, you shouldn't be in a rental business. In other terms, the folks that own their properties, we have a plethora of handouts of information to give them. Not only that, we'll also dig in to find out if they qualify for any grants. My staff has all the handouts for information for all the grants. We're trying to keep them out of court. If they can't make the repairs that are needed, we're doing everything we can to keep them out of court. Okay.
I would just like to say something to that. I think we need to be doing a better job. You know, our commitment had been to keep the poorest folks out and to find ways to get them help to remedy their situation. And I'm just going to strongly push back on that we have no housing navigator. We need that. We need it in your department. And we need that housing navigator to prepare them for, you know, what court is going to be, show them all the evidence, help them find their way to finding help, because my sense is that there still may be people being dragged into court that have no means to pay. And that effort, to me, is not even worth trying to spend a lot of time talking about because it's so frustrating to me. Because those are not the people that we need in court. And I know it's challenging working with some of the folks that don't have a lot of means.
Right.
You know, but we need to get that housing navigator back. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will say, come to court, just come to court and sit where we do, and you can see the folks that are in court. We've weeded 90% of the ones that don't need to go to court out. The ones that do show up to court, the first question is asked, do you own this property? If you own it, do you think you might qualify for a grant? And that information is immediately given to them. Those cases are immediately extended. If they qualify for a grant, those cases are extended till the grant's satisfied. Yeah. We don't want to prosecute anybody that doesn't deserve it or that can't afford it. We want to put that money back into the house. And Judge Thadani is excellent with that. He does a great job. So what we're after are the property owners that rent out property that are not up to standard. We're after those folks. I'm not targeting those folks, but I need to bring the property values up in the city of Topeka when it comes to rentals. I need to make it safe and secure for our occupants.
So back to the McGinnis report today.
Right.
You're thinking that our 2024 case records would make us a good baseline.
That would be a good baseline.
For evaluating in the future. And you do have the capacity to run reports on those records on how many return visits they required and things like that, so we can see that, right, in the future?
Yeah, we can get more detailed. This was just kind of a more broad overview of
Okay.
all of them. But we are starting to do that just in our performance measures already of how long it takes per inspections, but we could filter out just even like these for the, like, further case study.
Okay, this may be a subjective question rather than one you have any data on, but of course, part of our, what we worked on policy-wise and overall was wanting to protect those tenants who suffered for however long in these situations against retaliation and/or, either being evicted or feeling like they had to move, being forced out. What's your sense in these properties about whether people are being evicted or whether they're staying?
There's evictions happening. I'm not going to deny that. Whether or not the folks that are reporting these incidents are paid up in rent, the smart landlords always know that there's a hole that they can go down to file for an eviction. They watch for that. I've seen it happen. I am not convinced that all of them are legal. However, we're doing everything we can to protect
Okay.
our occupants that we
Right,
have.
just checking
Yeah.
overall.
I'm not going to deny that. I see it.
Well, and we heard reports last night at the
Yep.
council meeting of rent raises across a number of those properties of over $250 a month.
That's right.
That's amazing.
And if you remember a few council meetings ago, you had a representative from that company stand up here and say, we want our taxes decreased because we're going to up our rent. That's the same company that you had last night.
Just checking.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the fire report. This is a partnership between fire and property maintenance, whereby, again, for proactive health and safety reasons, to get into the multifamily apartment buildings. Fire has a long history of that, permission and so on, to tag code compliance with that so that information could be left. Nicole reported on some of that for one property, but we want to know how many you got done, how that process is going, and where we're going with it.
I would definitely say 2024 was a learning year for all of us. Not only were we implementing new inspection,
Is this what we're supposed to be having?
I only have notes.
This-
I don't have a report.
This is ours that goes along with
Okay.
it.
Yep. So, John, do you want to start on yours?
I will. Since this started in February, is that right? About
Yes,
February
about
last year?
February.
We've had 2 inspectors assigned to this task. The second inspector is Christian Marino. He took over 2 months ago, 3 months ago, something like that.
So
Anyway,
not two at a time, just one and then now another one?
Yes.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's always been one.
It's only one at a time, right?
Okay.
One PMU inspector, one fire inspector. However, I think Alan has the availability to have 4 inspectors. So he's doing more inspections than we are. We're trying to keep up with him, but we just don't have the manpower. Nevertheless, together, we did 32 complexes, 138 separate buildings. PMU cited 309 violations, 12 of which have been corrected, and the number of cases that have reached municipal court are 10.
Can you run through that just one more time?
Sure.
And that should be listed at the very back of
Yeah,
yours.
should
So
be
you
at the
won't have to
Okay,
write it down.
so we don't have to write it
Yep,
down?
no,
and-
all of those stats are at the
Got
very
it.
back.
Last page. Got it.
Right? So this also takes meeting after meeting after meeting with the people responsible for making these repairs.
Wait a
because
minute. 309 violations and 12 of them are cured?
12 cases, I think 12 complexes?
Well, that says
That's the
CBO.
that's the total violations, but CBO would be for just one.
So it would be a whole
So
complex?
it would be a whole complex, but there are a number of violations. So like just the very first one for North White Lakes, there's 40 violations. But there are 1, 2, 4,
So they
5,
count
6, 7, 8,
for
9.
1
Yeah,
through 12, but 40
Yes.
in the violation.
yes,
So, there
So
in
there's
theory,
like
all
7
40
numbers of
those could have been
buildings.
resolved by now.
yeah.
Okay.
So, just to bring everybody up to speed, when we do this inspection, they go out, most of the time it's unannounced?
No, we go announced.
You go announced, okay.
Absolutely announced.
They go announced, they meet with the apartment manager, and they go over the violations, whatever was found. We want 100% compliance from these apartment managers, so we have to work with them. And so my inspectors, if a property is cited, they will spend 3 or 4 or 5 meetings with them to make sure that their repairs are up to par, right, as expected. This is not one of those, we just show up, here's your courtesy notice, we'll come back in 60 days. This is not how that works.
Can we clarify then, because you're inspecting when we send this team out, the fire inspector is inspecting to the fire code.
Right.
And our property maintenance inspector is simultaneously inspecting only the public exterior and public places at that point
That's
for
correct.
property maintenance violations.
Correct.
Okay, so when we see number of violations and it says 40, is that just fire or is that fire and code
No, this is just
together?
code. The
This
report
is
you-
code.
This is just code.
Okay. And this is, we should assume when we see this, that this is code and not getting inside any units, just what you saw that were code things.
That's right.
On, when you did the walkthrough.
Yes, this doesn't include any like inside, this is all just outside multi-housing
Just so we know what we're
inspection.
seeing.
Right.
And then the
Okay.
highlighted, for the dates of the yellow, out of the 32, 30 of those were with fire directly at that same time. There was only 2 that our inspector went out separately.
Okay,
So again, it requires multiple meetings with the management to bring these in compliance. We don't want to have to send them to court, but we will and we do. We don't want to charge them money, but we will and we do. We want 100% compliance. And for the most part, the management teams that respect that and know how the legal system works will have these completed in a timely fashion. Those that don't take us serious, or they don't have the resources, find out pretty quick that we're serious about this.
You good on yours?
Yeah.
All right, so to follow up on that, 2024 was a very large year of learning for us. Our divisions work dramatically different in the way that our inspectors, what they inspect and how they inspect it, due to some of our timelines that we have in place on us through the state of Kansas Fire Marshal's office for what we have to be inspecting on other occupancies. It's made it a little more difficult to coordinate than we had originally thought. But we still made a commitment to get through as many of these buildings as we possibly could in the city. Last year, we did 189 inspections of apartment buildings that have exterior exits. Now, with fire code, that's a big difference because fire code only covers common spaces. So we can't, I have almost nothing I can cite inside of an individual unit. It really deals with the commercial side for the most part. We did 216 apartments with interior exits. Our goal is to get through 216 buildings or more every year. We wanted those buildings where your apartment door is inside a hallway are the ones of our highest hazard. So we have made a priority to get those inspected every year, and generally speaking, they are older apartments. In those apartments, complex or buildings that we did, out of all of them, we cited 667 fire code violations. As of the time I pulled this report, 320 of those had been cleared. So we had 347 open violations. The big thing about it, and I mentioned it before, is fire code violations are definitely not simple to fix, and they take significantly more time. So I've got our top 5 code violations that we cited across the city. We did 76 citations for doors that open into exit access corridors. So doors that open into those common hallways that weren't self-closing and self-latching. That's very important. If your apartment's on fire and you run out the door, we really want that door to close behind you so it doesn't go down the hallway. Those are hard for landlords to clear out because they have to, if an apartment is occupied, they have to make individual appointments with the resident of that apartment to get inside, put on the self-closing hardware, and get it done. We are working with those apartment complexes. We had 51 citations where fire extinguishers weren't provided in accordance or were out of test date. We had 45 citations for buildings that did not have either current fire alarms that were tested or fire alarms that did not report to outside of the building. When that comes back, in years past, buildings would have superintendents. So in historical, many of our apartment buildings were built with the fire alarms that only notified the residents and the people on site. So those didn't call out to an alarm center. When we adopted the 2015 Life Safety Code, I believe back in 2018, in that it does require for existing apartment buildings to upgrade their alarm systems to be monitored. We have been working very closely with our legal team and have drafted a letter that we hand out to every single apartment complex that is out of compliance with that, giving them a year to come in compliance. So we started doing that process in late 2023 and early 2024. So we're coming to the end of that year. The difficulty is that upgrading some of these alarms is going to be tens of thousands of dollars because more than one of these buildings I was in had the original alarm panels in it from when the building was built. So we're always trying to balance how fast we can get it done, how much money it costs, and what that effect is on our tenants. We did 42 other violations for exterior doors that would not close and latch. So if you have an interior apartment, basically you have to secure that outside door. And then 35 times we found fire doors with stoppers on them, holding them open. So we had a great year with that. We are very much working with our landlords across the board to try and bring those up, but knowing that we're coming up, especially with our alarm systems, on that 1 year mark. And my inspectors are currently going through those systems that we gave the 1 year notice to do follow-up to make 100% sure that that didn't get done and we didn't get told about it. And once they exceed that 1 year notice, we will notify them and refer them to prosecution for failing to comply.
If those buildings that you inspected this year had their original systems in them, then it sounds like you didn't inspect them before. Is this new then?
That is correct. So there was no mandate for those to be inspected every year. This is something extra that we took on as part of changing our culture of property maintenance. So this is something new for us. We have run complaints in those locations. So if we receive a complaint about a business or a building, we will send an inspector out. But there are many different locations that we don't make it to every year.
If I can follow up, you said that you had 189 inspections of buildings with exterior entrances, exits, 216 that are buildings that have all interior. And then you said your goal was 216 per year. So help us connect the dots on what this goal is.
Yeah, I wasn't clear about that, and I'm sorry. So our goal is to inspect every apartment building with an interior exit every year. We're actually a little bit short. We keep finding more and more because there is nowhere to find where they're all at. So as we find them, but our goal is to be in those buildings every year just due to the high hazards associated with them. The buildings with exterior exits, our goal is to make it to those once every 3 years. There's very little we can do on fire code on those. It really comes down to making sure that those exit pathways are clear and that there's fire extinguishers available. But that's essentially what we have on the fire code for those exterior exit buildings.
Question?
So you're shooting off a lot of numbers, and we don't have a report, so I would like to have a report, and as far as some kind of base write-up, and I still have to talk to Chair about this, because we want to give an updated presentation to the governing body. We don't want it to be full of data that is going to overwhelm them, so, whatever we do, we're going to have it sharp and tight, and so they can keep up to speed with where we're going. So I don't know how that's going to look.
No, that's a good point. Question for you all, because we've been working on, my understanding, as you reported along the way, was you were trying to wrap your arms around how many there really were total. And so of this 189 is far different than the 32 complexes and 138 buildings that code is reporting. And so I'm a little confused if you guys went together on all of them. So maybe you didn't. So you've got, if the 189 plus the 216 is what you all did this year, is that 100% of all the complexes that are there?
I can't say for certainty that is 100% of all the complexes in the city of Topeka.
And you all were working on a list though, so is there anybody that you didn't get this year?
I know of several within that we do have tracked and discovered that we did not get through. Several, I'm meaning quite a few, mostly with exterior exits. We're still working on trying to figure that out. Every way that we try and look at data has not been fruitful for us to be able to gather an accurate number.
Nobody's keeping a bank.
Did you decide along the way, I mean, part of it was the more you all were talking and looking, the more units you found, because of course you can have an old house that's divided up into 5 apartments, for instance. Did you yet agree on a threshold of size or structure of what you would include in this joint venture?
So with fire code, there are some very specific numbers, and I'll have to get that exact number to you, of number of units before an occupancy requires fire code inspections,
Okay.
or that many of these apply. I believe that is 8 units, but I need to go back and I'm not 100% sure on that, sorry. I don't want to give you false information on that. So from a fire code standpoint, that is our,
Well, that's what we're seeking, is so
Yep.
that you all have determined how many units are out there to the best of your ability, and and have come up, the idea was that by doing this jointly, you all would get those inspections, and for an exterior wouldn't take much time, but that it would also, by code combining, we'd catch that exterior, but that it would give us that entree to those complexes, because you all are already authorized and are doing those regular, or are authorized to anyway, and have a good routine down. And that did seem to work when we first started.
It's still working.
Well,
It
and
still
that's-
works.
Great.
That's what's happened, if you can see with our inspection log, is that 30 out of those 32, our one inspector went with a fire inspector to be able to go. So almost, 90%, 95% of all of our inspections were with fire. They have 4 more people, or 3 more people than we do. So whereas we were going out with one of them, he had 3 other inspectors that were also going out at the exact same time.
Okay, part of the idea was that whether it was 2 inspectors, 1 from each department going out together, or maybe just 1, it wasn't really fleshed out, that the information about the opportunity to turn in a property maintenance violation would be shared each time any of those visits were made, and at which point we could track whether we got any response. Or when your fire inspectors are going out by themselves, are they handing out our code compliance material?
No, they are not.
We can think about that.
Okay,
But we are, every time we go out, so I can give you some information to hand out.
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, my thought all along was, once you guys got the hang of it, there was not gonna be a need for 2 inspectors to go out on most of these. The idea was that was a way to make affirmative contact and be proactive about code compliance.
And I will say that you said it, getting the hang of it. This has been very much a learning year. We are in constant communication, trying to improve our process, see where we are coming up short, where our pain points are, and we're working together hand in hand as a team. I
Okay.
don't want you guys to ever get the thought that it's different.
Well, the numbers were way different, and we thought this was a joint venture,
Well,
and so
It is
just trying to
joint, but
figure
yeah,
out.
we only have one person committed to it because there's
Again,
just so many
but
things
the
happening.
literature under the door, it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Because the other question I asked you, I think the other day, was whether subjectively, again, our thought was that getting you all out there, that, at least in my experience, kind of inevitably you run into some tenants who go, "What are you doing here?" Who then give you an opportunity to have a conversation and say, "This is why we're here and this is what's up," which gets it out on the grapevine. Did any of those happen?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely they did. And White Lakes Plaza proves that. So after we were there jointly together, my inspectors, although they don't have the information to hand out, they are all they've all worked with code. And they will say, I can't inspect the inside of your apartment, but if you have problems with mold or leaky pipes or anything like that, please contact code compliance. Here's that they'll tell them the information. I think we've seen some positive benefit out of it. I know we have gotten a lot of questions, and we get more communication from tenants now asking, what should this be? What does a building that looks like, or, should be in fire code? Part of the reason we kept pressing forward when we were just too busy with one inspector and I had the other 3 going was to get into everywhere, to have good contact information, to be able to gather data, to be able to make 25 better than 24. So that's our goal. We're going to try and get to the point where we do it all together as much as we can, because there are a lot of things that my code just doesn't cite, that's quality of life, things that John's code handles. And I think they both have equal weight when it comes to residents, so.
And there's a huge amount of sharing information because I get emails from his staff all the time. Hey, we were just here. Can you send somebody out and look at this? And we have.
Yep.
Well, and that's what we're looking for. I guess, I know we started about 20 minutes late, so I don't know if people can stay. But in considering next year and future, frankly, given the properties that we're aware of, my first thought when you talked about where you were going to go annually and where you were going to go once every 3 years was I would reverse it. Again, thinking about whether there's any reason why your fire inspectors can't do those deliveries of the materials, whether whether there's somebody from PMU with them or not. The idea was you all were gonna be there anyway, taxpayer resources, hey, we're wanting to reach out, we can drop information. So,
Sure.
okay. This is really where we needed to be. It's good to get these reports, thank you. Lots to do, but we've done a lot of work so far. The item number 4, 2025 marketing and education, we just wanted to plug that in so it was on the agenda. The team from community engagement and marketing has put together a draft, full 12-month initiative with two pieces per month. They're working on getting the January rolled out with just some general information. Oh, got a handout, all right. Okay. Dan's got a handout, and so, thank you. Yeah, I even brought mine with me.
Is that yours?
You can have it. Sure, just a capsule, because what we thought we'd do is bring it back next month after the team has worked it and share in much more detail and get some feedback from the full committee.
Perfect.
In February.
Yes, Dan Garrett, Director of Communications. Good afternoon. So that is the 12-month social media plan. It's posting about twice a month. But as we met last week, we realized we're pushing a lot to the Changing Our Culture webpage, and it needs to be updated. So we received the changes that need to be updated. Nicole and I do have a meeting today scheduled that we will send that off to start getting those updated, which will help with all of the messaging that we send out.
Okay, and that has been a lot of work behind the scenes. Give them just a tidbit, because you've got, it's a combination of videos, posts.
Yes,
kind of
right. So a
delivery.
lot of it, in the years past, we've created a lot of graphics and pamphlets. So this is just utilizing what's already been created, sending out reminder posts, and also getting videos done to help explain some of these more complex initiatives like the retaliatory action. So we're filming those videos to help make it easy to understand.
Great. And there's discussion of direct outreach with email listservs, actually doing speaking engagements at different places that would really impact and deliver information. So you could be thinking about that. We didn't want to overwhelm you, but since you've got copies, you can poke through. And again, the marketing and education team meets on the second Thursday of each month. So if you all had some ideas or some questions, go ahead and pop them to Dan. You can CC Christina and me if you want, but we're going to review and consider that again next month.
Yes. And I can send a digital copy if you need.
Okay, thank you. Master plan, we've hit that 11 o'clock mark. City manager had to leave, but we had, if you think about it, when we first started, there was a council adopted document that had an aspirational goal, had some primary guiding principles, had a big aspirational goal. It had 4 specific goals, and out of that, we had Karen Black come and do a study, and she had 11 recommendations. We ended up with, depending on how big a paper you used and how big a type you used, about a 10-page, line-by-line work plan out of that, because as you've heard already, it was really pretty complex. At this juncture, at this 3-year threshold review structure, city manager has asked to meet with Councilwoman Valdivia and me, and then we have for 2 2-hour meetings to him personally be involved in refreshing what that is. If there were things that we thought were done, but now we need to revisit, things that aren't done yet, are they still important? Do we still want to get them done? And so on. So by our next meeting, which I think we should be able to meet next month, the goal was to do it in 2 weeks, and we do have 2 meetings scheduled before the end of the month to just grab hold of that and get on top of it. And so rather than take y'all through all those details today with all those questions, we hope to have something much tighter for you. Item number 6 is the legislative considerations. City attorney had to leave. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala and Councilman Duncan have been involved. We, do you want to just touch on what's happening at the state?
Sure. So as it relates to the right to inspect, we are writing as we speak with the revisor legislation that would alter Kansas law to allow us to go in and do inspections. Still need permission of the actual, individual who lives there. We're not going to violate their Fourth Amendment rights, among other things. But it will at least state that if you're going to take any public monies, if you're going to be that landlord who wants taxpayer dollars, that's fine, but it's not no strings attached anymore. You're at least going to have to let us in the property every once in a while to make sure that you're upholding your end of that. So that's the goal of that. It's being written. We've talked briefly with landlords associations and realtors they may be with us, they may be against us, but at least we're not catching them off guard. We want to get some of their input. So that bill is moving forward. It will be introduced. One of the items on here is the idea, which some states have, which allow individuals during a dispute to put dollars into an escrow account so that way they're still paying rent, and then once that issue's resolved, it can get floated over. That's a little bit more of a hot potato issue. Doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue it, but our approach to that right now is a little different. We have a state judicial council, and we think by starting with them, because the courts are going to have to be on board with that. If they aren't, then it doesn't matter what we push up the chain. And so we're going to petition to have the judicial council look at that and then maybe come up with some recommendations out of that. That judicial council works pretty well. They actually do get things done when they're put in front of them. So on that front, we're going to move that through. That means a bill for that may not come till next year, but at least we can get that moving and get that process started to get them on board. There are some affordable housing bills that are being put forward in the legislature. I haven't seen what any of those are, but some access to more money for local communities, maybe some zoning stuff, and then nothing's happening on the mental health front. That's the sad reality there, but I'll let Councilwoman Valdivia.
Well, and I think, what really happened is through my pushing, I expanded what we were going to talk about, and I was told later maybe I shouldn't have expanded it so much. But the right to inspect and that bill was why we went and met with the Shawnee County delegation to get that, to get that support. We knew to keep Escrow off the table because we didn't want to see their heads explode. And so Whitney and John Alcala are going to work behind the scenes, probably with Spencer through that judicial council, just getting it on the table. Rhiannon and Carrie were there, gave information out on affordable housing. I talked on Timberlee. I did add in the living wage and the mental health component because those are also part of our legislative agenda. You could tell some of them, their heads did want to explode because even though we were not talking about requesting them to run specific legislation, if that was just the right to inspect, we were trying to give them an on-the-ground view of what's happening here in Topeka and how dire the situation is with mental health. Asked them to support us getting funding. Living wage, they just flippant did not want to talk about, but that is all plays into more people getting pushed out of their homes. And, talked a little bit about Timberlee. Well, we talked a lot about Timberlee and the problems there. It really was, almost an hour and 20-minute meeting. And so we'll just see what comes of it. One other thing that I do want to mention is that what Spencer and I will be doing is that we really feel it's important to develop coalitions, whether it's about slumlords, whether it's about what we're doing with strengthening our LLCs, the challenges with mental health, Built for Zero, all of this. So him and I are going to be working on developing coalitions across the state of Kansas with other cities that are having similar problems so that with this coalition building, we can then maybe have a stronger chance of legislation either now or in the future. So that's where we're at.
And, one of the things that had come out of COVID was money from the state for mental health and also talking about affordable housing, particularly because of the explosion of the homelessness issue. So tying those together helps to at least keep things on the table. But on those inspections, again, meanwhile, you're our boots on the ground to test whether we need that, or be able to bring forward cases where you've identified that there's an issue that we really need to make sure we get in. Part of the driver for, as I understand it, for that particular proposal was so that somebody didn't have to be personally named as the person who called code.
Right.
Whether retaliation was fully protected or not, people are afraid. And so you're the front line on that, so. Questions? We'll see how things are progressing. I put it on as discussion for possible action in that typically if there's something really specific, it's ideal to go through the council, but there's not enough time on these things and they've got to move it. So we'll stay tuned, watch for news about how that's progressing. There may be a need for advocacy or whatever. City of Topeka, just letting you know that we announced it last time, but the copies are out. If there's anybody here or anybody watching later who would like to see, we've got actually four versions out for people to look at. One is the current version that we are using, which is updated through November, but we backdated and went to the one that was pre-IPMC, that the city, format the city used for years. A plus on that one is it's less than half the size of these much more detailed, newer ones. It's very simple and straightforward. You can kind of see how it was phrased before. Then we have the current one. Then also there is the absolute model, bare bones IPMC 2024 version that we're talking about moving toward. And then staff has already also made available the, what is it called? The annotated version.
Right.
The commentary version, which is twice as big as that big long code.
Both of them are so big, I can't email them.
Right, and so if people want copies, they can get them from John, or we can arrange to get them transferred so you've got access to look at them or get them printed. But really looking at each one of those, and my suggestion on how to, I've taken a run through it, is to first put your hat on that you just want to look at what the standards are. What are we saying are the standards? And go from one to the other, but keeping in mind where we've run into trouble.
Right.
You know, where there's been some question, is it really covered by the code, or is it too much or too little? But look at just the standards, which are actually in the middle of both of those codes. And then go back and look at the whole string of just right to enter and the notices and the penalties. I really would almost say, look at the right to enter and the notice process as a second track, and then go back and look at the fines, fees, and any penalties as a third track. And because we'd made some assumptions when we started this process that when we had adopted the fines and fees, everything was getting assessed on everything, and it's not. But also looking at, we're now getting reports from staff on what's actually, and Councilwoman has asked for specifically, what have we assessed in fines, fees, and abatements? What have we collected in fines, fees, and abatements, and from who? The best you can identify that, so we can see a little better what we're doing now.
Right.
But when you look at those codes, and John has just said anybody can look at them. He's eager to have the commentary or whenever we're ready, right?
I'm waiting for more feedback from the group that I picked. I've been busy for the last 2 weeks, so I haven't been able to view it. But once I do, I'll let you know if there's any updates somebody added. I'm going to move forward to adding our input from the 2012, all the supplemental stuff in red, to the, I'm going to have a meeting with legal pretty soon, Bonnie, and see if it's going to conflict with the 2024. I don't think it does, but I wanted her to review it and put it in place.
There you go.
So when we do adopt it, you don't have to dig everywhere to see what we've already changed, amended.
Good, because it's pretty clear on the version you have, the stuff that was customized by Topeka is in red.
Right.
So you can see that. What I would encourage everybody to do otherwise, just like we did today, is to keep a crib sheet on the side as you review those ordinances of, suggestions like you made. We need a matrix that says, okay, we say we have the power to do this, but what's that going to look like?
Maybe the matrix needs to be in the repeated customer part of it, because there is a section.
Repeat offender.
a repeat offender.
Again, we can decide
Yeah.
whether it needs to be policy or an administrative procedure,
Yeah.
but sometimes an admin procedure, we think it's working and we find out it disappeared. And so understand that's our sensitivity from the policymaking side. But if there are any issues that you think, we've talked about a lot of them, we've learned a lot in the last 3 years as we've tried to work with this, that aren't quite working the way we thought. Is there a hole? Is there something we need to address? We want to make sure that we address it not only if it needs to be in the code while we're doing that, but if we need to look at it on the side, then, for instance, the retaliation protections, I'm concerned that we're still not there yet. And so, just let's do that. This is going to be quite the policy year, but we've learned a lot. We want to improve those procedures, get some more data. Any other questions or concerns or suggestions for the group? All right. Thank you, guys. You've worked really hard on this and appreciate it. With that, we're adjourned. I'm expecting us to meet in a month.
Okay.